Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. My name is Corrie. The name of this podcast is Expats in Ukraine. I'll tell you a bit about myself and then we'll introduce our guest. My name is, like I said, Corrie. I'm originally from California, Los Angeles. I moved to Ukraine in 2015. I moved here because of some volunteer work that I was doing. I ended up staying here for about, a couple of years, teaching English. And then I ended up falling in love with the country. I work in IT right now, as well as doing podcasts like this. But it's been about 9 years. I've lived here during the full-scale invasion. I've seen a lot. I have friends that, experienced a lot, and they shared with me their stories. I feel like I'm not an expert, but I'm pretty close for being a foreigner. And let me introduce my guest right now. This is Jay. He has quite a following on social media. What is it, 20,000 followers now, Jay, on Instagram?
On Instagram, just 22 there, yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I checked out Jay's Instagram. Really good stuff. Talks about daily life in Ukraine. Super interesting. So I hope to get, your takes on these different topics that we have today. So the topic of this would be, about the way men deal with, certain regulations and laws like in Ukraine right now. I know it's very strict and it's very kind of, how do you say, it's very uncomfortable for, certain people here. And, as foreign guys living in Ukraine, the rules sometimes don't apply to us. So I want to talk about, the differences between that, what we go through, and then differences what local Ukrainian people go through. But, really quick, before we get into that, just, in a few words, just tell me about yourself, Jay.
Yeah, my name's Jay Schnell. Thank you, Corrie. Yeah, I'm from Canada. I came to Ukraine for the first time just over 2 years ago. I was here backpacking, actually, just traveling around. At that time, it was COVID times, so you needed a secondary vaccination. So I came to Ukraine to get a secondary vaccine so I could keep traveling. I was in Estonia at the time. I couldn't get it in Latvia or Lithuania. I couldn't get it in Poland. So I hopped a flight to Kyiv International Airport. When I arrived here, and you can't fly out of there anymore, can you? No. Yeah, when I arrived here, some journalists showed up. I'm a professional photographer and videographer at the time. I mean, that was my main vocation of traveling the world. So I got hired and ended up becoming a journalist. Decided I'd stick around and work here as a journalist. And now I'm a teacher as well, actually. So things have kind of come full circle. I make a lot of content about Ukraine. I'm currently just finishing a book, a memoir of my experience here before and during the war. And I'm filming a documentary of me visiting every oblast of the country right now.
Oh, every oblast?
Yeah, well, wow. Each one that's not occupied by
I was going to say, there's a couple oblasts that are like really dangerous if, you can go. And some probably you can't go.
Yeah.
But, so really quick, before we get into the topics, before you came to Ukraine, what was your not experience, but like, what did you know about Ukraine? I'm super interested, asking this question to foreign people, because before I came, I had no idea, basically. And now that I'm here, I just feel like I was so naive back then. You've been here 2 years. So what did you know before you came?
I think that's the best way to visit a country. People always say, how do you show up to a country and know nothing about it? I'm like, I always show up to countries I know nothing about. It's a super interesting experience where you can learn and indulge yourself in the local culture, learn from the locals. So I didn't really know much about Ukraine. A small portion of my family did immigrate to Canada from the farming community of Saskatchewan, so a lot of Ukrainian diaspora, and part of my family did come from Kherson region to Canada from Ukraine. I grew up eating certain Ukrainian foods like vareniki and borscht, but aside from those subtle little cultural nuances and hearing the women are beautiful, I didn't know anything about Ukraine.
Jay. Red borscht or green borscht?
I really like a good green borscht. Depends on where the place is. But I mean, obviously in this region, it's usually the red. But if I'm in Lviv, there's a restaurant I go to that has the best green borscht. I go there every time.
Yeah, I always forget the word. Maybe our studio can help us out. What is like that green stuff they put in the green borscht that makes it kind of bitter or sweet? Not sweet, but bitter. Like kind of sour. What is that? It's like a green kind of herb, ne petrushka, that's something else. But anyways, we'll look at it later. But I know I love green borscht as well, but it's so hard to find it. I don't know. I always just end up getting the red borscht, but secretly deep down inside, I'm disappointed that, I don't have green borscht. But anyways, well, thanks so much for explaining why you're here and, how you're connected to Ukraine. But let's get into the topics now. So the first one I want to talk with you about is, closed borders for men. So tell me your thoughts on this. Like, the rules, right? Should I explain the rules to to you, or you kind of more or less like understand the rules, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I understand that at this point, it's men that are 18 to 60 years old are unable to leave the country unless they have medical exemption or maybe some kind of other military-based or study-based or artistic-based exemption, and that allows them to leave the country. My personal opinion of it, going back to the beginning of the war, is, I mean, I even had an opportunity to skip the line to leave the country. I decided I'd stay, and the philosophy at that time was women and children first. And I definitely agree with that philosophy that we should take care of the women and the children, and the men should wait behind them in the line when it comes to evacuating, because we had millions of people fleeing the country at that time, right? But at this point, it is a little bit complicated, you know, and I think there's definitely certain times where I might agree or disagree with men that have left this country. I mean, we're both discussing, like, we both have a decent following on social media, and the majority of people following us that are in other countries from Ukraine, they're women. And I think the big reason for that is a man who maybe illegally or unethically left this country is not going to be following a man from North America who decides to live here, right? Might raise a weird weird alarm in their face, right? But I think there's also important things to consider around that topic. Like, I have a friend does very well in business in the amounts of millions. And this guy, when he leaves the country, he continues to support the military. So should there be exemptions for people on the high economic stream of Ukrainians that can contribute more to their country and their military if they're doing business outside of the country? And I think the answer that most Ukrainians will give you would be yes. I've had this discussion with many people, but there are certain lines where, you know, I'm here. I live here. I chose to live here. This is my choice. But people did choose to leave this country legally. There's a lot of them. A lot of them are living peacefully in my country right now. And very few of them support the work that I do in Ukraine.
Well, in Canada, I know there's a big diaspora of like Ukrainians as well. But yeah, when it comes to like this topic of, you know, men leaving the country, to me, it's like always, you know, controversial, you know, because, you know, I'm not Ukrainian. You know, sure, I live in this country, but I can travel freely, you know, outside the country. I can stay here if I want. And a lot of my friends that are Ukrainian men that are abroad, I don't know anybody that left the country illegally, but I know people that left maybe before the war, and they're always not jealous, but they miss home. You know, whenever I say, oh, I'm going back to Ukraine, of course it's not, you know, too safe, but they're always saying like, oh, I miss home. I wish I can go back. And unfortunately, that's kind of not the reality for them. They have to stay away from their home for so long. But when it comes to, you know, people leaving the country and people staying in the country, you have people that do one of the either extreme. One is like, you can't force people to like stay in the country against their will, you know, and force them to maybe like, I don't know, be conscripted or something like this. And one is if you open the borders then, and a lot of the guys leave, then no one's here to defend the country. And you know what? There is no right or wrong answer here. It's up to the individual to decide, but the country's at war. So I understand the government has to make some really tough decisions. And when it comes to these specific laws about closing the border, I more or less like agree with them, but you know, it's easy for me to say as an American sitting here because yeah, I have some friends that are Ukrainian men that are still live in Ukraine, and they're so scared to go outside sometimes because they're too scared to get like povistki, which is kind of like I guess this document that they can give you on the street that, you know, it's basically conscription
I've heard of this happening in both Odessa and Kharkiv.
Yeah.
I've heard of men on the streets being handed, or sometimes even stories have come up of them potentially being taken off of the streets. And I personally know people whose family members or whose partners are scared to leave the house because they're scared of being
I don't know about you, but I've been stopped for posvitki like 5 times already. So 2 times I was in Dnipro, and I was just like walking the street, and one time I was meeting my girlfriend at the Vauxhall, and then I got stopped right when they seen my posvitka, which is the Ukrainian ID. They say it says like США, like USA, and then they give it back to me and they're friendly. But I can imagine like if I was just a Ukrainian guy, you know, just walking the streets, you know, it's kind of scary because one minute you're going to meet your girlfriend at the Vauxhall, the next, you know, you're in like a load of not trouble, but you're in like such a scary situation. But anyways, I feel like I'm going too far like off the topic right now, but it's like it's a really tough decision. I feel like the individual has to make it, but we are a society, and Ukraine has a government that was elected by the people, and this is just a decision I guess like the government has to make, but everyone has like their own opinion on it. And yeah, it's like a really controversial topic, but I wanted to get like your insight on it.
Yeah, I mean, my personal opinion is like I have friends from other countries in the world that are fighting right now on the front lines that aren't Ukrainian, and they chose to come here to defend this country. I don't think every single man should go and fight. I mean, imagine your country wherever you are in the world, those that are listening, and imagine the people that you'd want to be beside you if you were fighting in a war. Now imagine all the people you don't want to be beside you. And when I hear men say this, oh, these men should be fighting, their country's at war, I see a guy walking down the street dancing to his Walkman who looks very small, and I said, do you want him beside you in a trench? Not to be judgmental, but some people are not fighters and some people are. I think for me, in my personal opinion, is at least do something. There's some young kids who work at a Roma Kava near my house. I can get a coffee at 6:30 a.m. from these kids. They're awake, they're working, they're contributing to their economy, they're studying in university, they're doing something. If you're just wasting away doing absolutely nothing while your country's at war, that for me personally, because I work so hard in this country, is frustrating.
Yeah, do you know how to shoot a gun? You ever shot a gun before?
Yes, yeah, definitely. When I visited your country, the United States.
Of course, we have a lot of guns.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from California. We have really strict kind of like laws on, weapons, guns especially. But when I was traveling across the U.S. on my motorcycle, I made a stop in Kansas to visit a friend, and they understood that I'd never shot a gun before. So they invited all the neighbors to come out to this village, and they all gave me guns to shoot. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say with this, I feel like I'm going off topic too much. It's just that, if I got conscripted to go to the army, because sometimes I feel like maybe I want to help in a way, because I love Ukraine so much, and I would love to. I'm helping right now. I'm donating. I'm doing volunteer work. I'm contributing to the local economy, but I just feel like sometimes I can do more. But then I think about, especially like what you were saying right now, like not everyone's equipped. Me, if I go to Donbass or whatever, I don't even know how to shoot a gun. I feel like I'll be more of a liability. Someone will rely on me with their life. And, if I make one mistake, then it could be a catastrophe for them and I, so I feel like, like you're saying, like not everyone is like built to fight. And for me, if I had the proper training, maybe, but I'm not. But I've met so many people like abroad that's like when I was in Portugal, because I moved to Portugal for a bit after the war. And in Portugal, I met this American guy, and he was like, I'm like, oh, what? It's your first time in Europe? He's like, yeah, I'm going to Ukraine. I'm like, oh, wow, I used to live there. And he was like, oh, yeah, I want to fight. I was in the military in the U.S. He's a young guy, like 23, 24. And he's like, yeah, I want to go fight, and I just want to help. I heard what's going on in the news. And yeah, he really wanted to help. I lost touch with the guy. I wonder how he's doing, but I don't know. This is like, super interesting to me because this guy was built for it. He was trained for it, and he wanted to contribute. So whereas, someone like maybe you or I don't know if you shoot guns better than me. Probably. I don't know. But I'm American, so it's like natural ability for me. But yeah, I feel like I would be more of a liability than an asset.
I think it's interesting how things happen here. I've seen a lot of people inspired to fight. Even one of my best friends, we decided to stay here to provide video coverage for this war. He's a Japanese Canadian, and what happened is he left. He got scared. He left, and he ended up coming back and enlisting in the military. His battalion had 100% casualty rate. They were all injured, including him. A shell hit behind him. The soldier behind him was from England. Mm-hmm. The shrapnel went through that soldier, killed him, and went into my friend. He went through extensive surgeries for about 6 months. He's back on the front lines now, fighting, flying a drone.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Where is he from? He's from Canada as well.
He's Canadian, Japanese Canadian. So like I'm working with these guys with endoprosthetic limbs at a clinic here. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a documentary for them right now. So they have like these amazing limbs that are total technological anomalies. The best doctors in the world have come together to develop these arms and legs. And a lot of these guys, their biggest ambition is to go back and fight, you know, even these injured soldiers. And so it's interesting. There's journalists and volunteers that have turned into military from just seeing the horrific nature of this war. So it can inspire you to run away, but some people, it can inspire you to run towards it, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I feel like I'm kind of young. I'm 35. I haven't really gone through too many wars. I mean, the U.S. had like this war in the Middle East like for a million years, but this is like, to me, this is like a clear, you know, situation where you can identify easily which side is good, which side is fighting for good, and which side is bad, and which side is fighting for like the wrong reasons. So, I mean, this like war has inspired a lot of people to help, whether it's, you know, fighting directly or, you know, supporting by donations or something like this. But this is like one of those, you know, wars where, you know, Ukraine inspires like so many people. Like, I don't know, I'm so proud to say that I live in this country, you know, to people. You know, I wish my Ukrainian is better. I still speak a bit of Sergic, unfortunately, but, you know, I really love this country, and I feel like I would do so much for it. But let's go back to conscription. So are you familiar with, like, for example, your friend that is Canadian, that came to Ukraine? They just volunteered. They just went to like a local office, volunteered. I don't know how
he was living
works.
here. He was like you and I. He fell in love with the country.
Okay.
Right. He fell in love with the country, but he left in the beginning. He was scared.
Okay.
He's one of the bravest guys I know here. Right.
Yeah. So because we were talking about, it's like they can just like maybe pick you up off the streets or something like this. Are you familiar with like, you know, Canada's like conscription laws or something like this? Say if Canada was at war, is this something you ever looked into?
No, I'm not too sure about it, but I honestly can tell you from a personal note that if Canada was at war and my family's home was being threatened, then I would take a gun and I would fight to protect my family. 100%. I know that because I love my mom. I love my dad. I love my sister. She has 2 beautiful children. You know, I love my cousins. I love my family. And if this was happening in my country, I say my weapon is my camera, right? But if this was in my country, I would be fighting. And I know a lot of the men in my family would too, to defend, you know, our land, our country. And it's not fair. Ukraine was just hanging out, doing its thing at a bar, having a beer. And this big, you know, angry man just came up and started smashing their table, right? If you want to look at it like that, it's kind of a dumb analogy. But really, Ukraine was living its life, doing its thing, and Russia came to invade it. I don't think that this is fair, and you said it right or wrong. I'm supposed to be a biased journalist, but after living here long enough, seeing what I have, I really do think what Russia's doing is wrong. And the majority of targets I've reported on are not military targets. When they hit one, it's like, oh, wow, they finally hit an actual military target. You know?
Probably an accident.
Yeah, exactly.
They were aiming for a hospital.
They missed the civilians and they hit the military target.
Darn. Yeah. But but if you look at Ukraine history, it's just like, you know, a history of, you know, Russian aggression. You know, and it's horrible. Like my channel on, you know, Instagram, as well as TikTok and YouTube, it's just about, you know, Ukrainian culture and history. And a lot of the videos I make, you know, some people comment like, wow, like this Russian aggression against Ukraine, it goes back like way before, you know, 2014 or, you know, before like the Soviet Union. Like it's been going on for like a long time. And it's, I don't know, it's just very, like the history of Ukraine is very sad if you really look into it. You know, such brave and strong people. And, you know, this inspires me like all the time, especially after like, you know, this full scale invasion. So many, you know, Ukrainian men stepped up for to the call of duty, and, you know, Ukraine lost, you know, their like a lot of their great people, and it's like really sad to think about. But yeah, so let's talk about so in Canada you said you would fight, you know, for your family and your country if your city or your country is being like shelled or something like this. But, you know, I have like it's kind of like a philosophical question. I like asking people this because I kind of get a better understanding of who they are. So the question is, you have 2 options, okay? One of them is, okay, say there's a world war going on, and the winner of this war, the winner of this war will change, like, you know, the history of the world. You know, it's like this huge war, you know, world war, everyone's involved. And if you join it, you'll be a small piece, but of a huge change. Okay. And the second option is you can say the war is going on, and the second option is you can stay home and you'll be with like maybe your sick parent or sick relative or something like this, and you'll miss out on being a small piece of this huge movement, this huge change. But if you stay home, you'll be a big part of a small change, because you're going to be in this person's life when they're sick or not doing well, what would you decide to do?
Well, you're asking somebody that willingly moved away from Canada and his entire family to live in Ukraine, right? So I think you know my answer, right? I'm willingly.
I want you to say it.
Well, I'm willingly making a decision to be in this country and giving my life and dedicating and risking my life to try to inform people about what's going on here.
Yeah.
I spend nearly all of my time that I don't spend teaching people English in this country and teaching children at my job, filming and trying to make videos to inform people and keep them engaged in this conflict, because I believe that that's extremely important to the future of this country. And I believe that the future of Ukraine, it's not only the future of Ukraine. Ukraine is in the middle between Europe and Russia. And I would consider Ukraine to be a part of Europe, not to bring any offense to anybody, but I made a choice to involve myself in something that is extremely important, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah, no, it's really noble, very honorable, man. But let's talk about let's move on. Let's talk about kind of the impact that this war can have on other countries or Western Europe. So, really quick, tell me, in your honest opinion, how do you think the war will end?
That's a really difficult question.
Do you think but personally, how do you think it will end? Do you think it'll end like on whose terms? Think there'll be a middle ground? I have my opinion, but let me hear yours.
I think it's very possible at this point, with the lack of Western support, that Ukraine could lose this war and it could spread into Europe. I don't think anybody wants to believe that. We all want Ukraine. We're in Ukraine. Obviously, Ukrainian people want Ukraine to win, but it's starting to become more of a topic of conversation that there's a possibility Ukraine could lose. And if they do, then it means war for Lithuania, Latvia.
But when you say like Ukraine loses, what do you mean by Ukraine loses?
Well, if Ukraine cannot defend its territory.
But what do you mean loses? Like, what is lost? Like, you lose Donbass and Crimea forever? You lose the whole country?
If they can take Ukraine, I think if they can take the capital and they can continue to move their way to the West, they will continue to Europe. And especially, I really don't think that NATO has huge vested interest in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Moldova. I think those countries would definitely be a good target to go next. I think Georgia would potentially be next.
NATO, Georgia has been before next. They were like invaded was in 2008 or something like this, like Abkhazia and South Ossetia. So they are very familiar with Russian aggression. I used to live in Georgia actually for 3 months in Tbilisi. But yeah, they have a Soviet past just like Ukraine, so a lot of people speak Russian there. But from, the Georgian people I met, which are great people, by the way, and they also have great food. I know you were eating a hachapuri earlier.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not really fond, of Russia too much.
There's a lot of good people from Georgia here, a lot of soldiers. I have a lot of friends here from Georgia that are fighting for the military.
Well, of course, because they're like kind of like almost like brothers. Like they're going through a similar thing that Ukraine is going through. But let me tell you something, because you said like NATO doesn't have a vested interest in losing like Latvia, Lithuania, or Estonia or something like this. Did you know that NATO has only been tested once? Their alliance has only been tested once during a war. Do you know this?
No.
So the only time the NATO alliance and the treaty was tested was it was a little after 9/11, 2001. So basically, U.S. declared war on Al Qaeda or whatever, and they asked NATO, because of the treaty, they asked them to help with their war, and the UK stepped up. Among other countries, one of the UK was France also, I believe it was. I'll fact check this later. Don't worry. But anyways, so it was this was the only time that NATO was tested as an alliance, and they did step up. So I think especially being Western, I think that Russia would be stupid if silly, or I would be so dumbfounded if they decide to actually go into any of these NATO countries, because. Yeah, even if the U.S., I know the U.S., they have, the politics in the U.S., it just makes me so angry. But even if the U.S. wasn't involved, because say we had Donald Trump and he said the NATO's not paying their dues, so we're not going to be involved even if they, if Russia attacks. I know Trump said this, and the election is soon. So I don't really trust the U.S. in this way, but I feel like what is going on in Europe right now, they're starting to become more independent when it comes to their militaries. And I feel like the alliance in Europe actually is, the strongest it's been since maybe World War II. There's a war on the doorstep. I think Russia, they won't stop. The only way Russia will be stopped is if they are stopped. So it's basically, sure, you can fight. Like, I don't know, it's like you have to fight, fire with fire, and this is how like Russia is. Even if Putin dies, I just feel like they will still keep going. There's somebody below Putin that is just about as bad as Putin, probably. So I don't think it'll end with that. Ukraine, it just has to stop them, full stop. They have to take Donbass back. They have to take Crimea back. Unfortunately, like a lot of people, potentially can be casualties in this, but I feel like this is the only way. Because if Zelensky decides tomorrow that, okay, we don't want our people, to be hurt anymore, we don't want any more casualties, so we'll just give them Donbass and let them keep Crimea. I just feel like there would be so many protests. It'll be all the people that's died or injured in this war. It'll be like, for what?
This situation right now is not looking so good, though. I was just interviewing a journalist, Tom Much from New Zealand, who just came back from the front line near Kopiansk area, and they are moving back. I have friends that are fighting on those lines. They are moving back, and they are not able to fire as much back at the Russians as being fired at them, and that is as a result of lack of military aid, supposedly.
Well, what's
information
going on in the US
I'm receiving, right?
What's going on in the U.S. right now with this kind of bill it's not passing Congress? So it's so bad, man. It's like 60 to 80 billion dollars worth of like military aid. It's not direct, cash in hand, but it's kind of maybe like old equipment or contracts to create. Like,
apparently the impact's already being felt, and
and right now it's
by the people there.
And like I was reading like articles saying that Russia's trying to take advantage of this because Donald Trump, he kind of owns the Republican Party, and whatever he says goes. And the Democrats, they wanted to pass this law to give Ukraine like 60 to 80 million dollars, and the Republicans said no, we need to protect our own country. And so the Democrats were saying that, okay, we will compromise, then we will put some money into this border security. And so they created a bill which is bipartisan, Republican and Democrats, and then they brought it to the House. And then Donald Trump told, was it Mike Johnson, which is like the Speaker of the House? He told him, okay, you know what? My whole campaign is to run on fear and immigration. So don't pass the bill, because now I won't have anything to strive for, because he has no policies. He has no politics besides like he just wants to not be arrested and go to jail. He'll just like clear himself of like all of his crimes if he does become president again. So this is why the bill is being held up, and the election's not till November. And the bill got brought to Congress in like November. So it's so wild how complacent the U.S. is, when their treaty with Nieto is like hanging in the balance, when the free world and democratic values are, hanging in balance as well. I'm just so disappointed in my country. I wish my country could be as brave and as strong as like Ukraine. Really, like I don't know.
I'm
it's
seeing
such a
results of it as a journalist. I'm supposed to go meet with different military battalions to go interview with them and do filming, and they're keep postponing it. They're saying, sorry, there's a lot going on over here. We've moved back from our trenches recently. Our territory's being moved back. Friends supposed to come visit me recently. Another guy from the military. Sorry, man, we're all trapped here right now. Some of us are quote unquote trapped, he said to me. And it's not that they're trapped there. It's that, they have plans to maybe take a leave from the military, but they can't right now because they have to stay put where they are. Yeah. So, I mean, that being said, just from my general sources, my friends and people that I know, it seems like something is going on, and that the Russians are taking advantage of the lack of military support right now.
Yeah, but one of the problems, though, with Europe, I feel, it's just they don't understand the reality of what's going on here. Like,
I would say Americans and Canadians know even less.
Yeah, like, of course, we're like a whole ocean away. Now, my girlfriend likes to say, like, we live on an island. She's like, oh, you guys live on your island over there on the other side of the ocean, like, because we're so isolated. And because of this isolation, you develop kind of like ethnocentric kind of policies and, America first and make America great again, whatever this is, but we are much more than that. As much as the Republicans try to kind of keep us away from these kind of, democratic values. But when I grew up, it was very comfortable. I didn't have to go through the struggles of, I'm 35, I was born in 1988. If I was born like in Ukraine, this is like, I don't know, a few years before the Soviet Union fell apart, and then it was like chaos, after that. Ukraine had to get their government in order. They had to create their own currency. This is like chaos. I
think there's still residual corruption from that time in this country.
Well, of course, it's just like, the struggle, and it makes people like, I guess, more strong. And, in the U.S., it's like so comfortable. We can't imagine somebody trying to invade the U.S., We've been bombed in World War II, but that was like Hawaii. This is like so far away in the middle of the ocean, even though it's like our 49th state, but it's just so far away. So people don't understand the reality of like what's going on. Like, and it's so shocking to me. And sometimes my friends message me, they say like, what's going on over there? Like, I guess it's safe because you're there. I'm like, no, it's not safe. But, I live here. I feel like this is basically my home now. I spent more time in Ukraine this last decade than in the U.S. I've only visited like, I don't know, 5 times or something like this for like a couple months each, but it is so crazy how complacent people like in the West can be. They don't understand the reality until it like, hits them in the mouth, I guess. I don't know. And this is why I just feel like, podcasts like this, where we can talk about what's going on, maybe it'll enlighten some people, and maybe like and this is why I like creating content on social media as well. I feel like your social media channel is more kind of geared towards everyday life and what's going on. And, I feel like a lot of people, they share your content to show, their friends like in the West that's, it's scary in Ukraine, and, Ukraine could fall and everything, my home can be, occupied, the place I lived in can no longer, be there. And it's all because of like Russian aggression, and this is, I don't know, it's so bad. And speaking of like occupied, have you ever been to like Irpin, Bucha, Mariupol, any of these?
No.
The cities? Never.
No.
Not even like after Irpin and Bucha are like.
I've been invited to go to both of those places numerous times, but lately I've been traveling so much for filming my documentary, I haven't made it out yet. Yeah, I even work with a girl from Irpin, and her husband really wanted me to come by, but no, I'm definitely going to be doing that for my Kyiv part of my documentary. Yeah. But I haven't made my way there yet.
Well, it's definitely like an experience, man. Like I used to live in Kotzubinski. Kotzubinski is like this enclave, like next to Akademistiechko Metro, which is like the last line on the red line. So I lived in Kotzubinski when the invasion happened. So I'm like right next to like Irpin, like literally I'm in Buchansky Rayon, which is like the Bucha region. Like I had appendicitis, so I had to like do surgery. And I went to a hospital in Bucha, and I was there for like a week in the hospital. I don't know, a Ukrainian hospital is something else, man, especially like a public one. But anyways, I was there, and I would go, fill out my, tax documents, my propiska and stuff like this. I would go to, these facilities in Irpin. Irpin was so nice, by the way. Like they had a really nice community. It's like a lot of families and stuff like this, very beautiful. Bucha is kind of rural because it's kind of out there. And there's like a forest that separates like where I was from, living Kotzubinski, Irpin, and Bucha. And I've been after it was occupied, like maybe a month or so after. It's so surreal, man. So surreal. I passed by that bridge, that famous photo where they're hiding under the broken bridge because like there's like an air raid or something like this. And they're just waiting to get the go ahead to cross. I passed by that bridge. It's so surreal, man. I've seen, apartment blocks with huge like artillery mortar shells in them. I've seen people still living in these broken down buildings because they have nowhere else to go, man. It's so sad. And I don't know, just seeing like these photos from like the day or 2 days after the occupation, where the streets are so littered with, military vehicles, houses are no longer there. I have friends that were living in Irpin and Bucha and stuff like this. And they told me like horror stories, how their house was, Russian soldiers, they're living in their flats and just like stealing everything. They stole everything. They kind of totally destroyed it. These people are savage, man. Right before the invasion, though, I was looking at, the news, and I understood they may like invade. So I went to Mukachevo, where my ex-girlfriend was living. So I was in Mukachevo for like, a week before, and I said, if anything happens, then I'll just stay here. We'll go to Europe. And if something doesn't happen, I'll just come back to Kotzubinski. And they invaded. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go there, because I understand, Russian people, they have like a different like mentality. And I knew that if, Russian soldiers came and occupied a certain area, especially like in the north, where I was living is like in the north, then it'd be like one of the first places to be occupied coming to Kyiv. And if they come and I'm American, of course they don't like Americans. And I didn't know it was going to be this bad, like how it was in Bucha, Irpin, even Mariupol. But it's so, man, like it's nightmare. like for sure. Like, I don't know. I'm so glad I made the decision to leave because, you know, we have this group chat for our Jaka, like our apartment complex, I guess. And in the group chats, they were saying, you know, like we can see helicopters flying by. You know, we see kind of like we hear explosions. We can see rockets. It's so wild, man. Imagine like you're living in Canada, and then you just, you know, wake up one day and there's like military helicopters, explosions.
I was here.
Yeah,
when it started.
Yeah, I just feel like if that happened in the West, people would take this more seriously. You know,
I think interesting concept I always entertain is imagine one Shahed drone smashes in the center of Berlin or Warsaw.
Yeah.
What would the reaction be? I think in 2 seconds you could tell who's Ukrainian and who's Polish when the Shahed hits.
Well, yeah, no, of course, and this is why. I know this is why it's good to kind of get, you know, information out to the West, but, you know, a lot of people aren't going to believe it until they see it. And a lot of times when they see it, they're still not going to believe it because there's like this famous joke that George Carlin does. I think I sent it to you actually on Instagram. I believe it was George Carlin. And he says, imagine how dumb the average person is, like the average person. Imagine how dumb they are. Now, you have to imagine 50% of the population is stupider than that. You know, so I can't doubt it. Ever since like I've been in the US, I think my country people are so dumb. I don't know.
I'm Canadian. We have like a bit of a different view on it, but a lot of them have came here and helped, and I know a lot of really great American people that are here doing great work for Ukraine. A lot of really amazing humanitarian aid workers and military personnel, and medics that are here, dedicated and willing to even, you know, lose their life and have. Some of them even have lost their life, died for Ukraine. So, you know, you have to commend.
Yeah, there's a lot of brave people out there, like, you know, from all countries, not just Canada, the U.S., whatever. You know, there's a lot of brave people from Europe. You know, and this is like you were saying before. You know, there's a lot of Georgian people in this like Foreign Legion. It's because Georgia understands Russian aggression. You know, they've been through it.
They're tough too. They're tough guys.
So I mean, like if other countries went through stuff similar to like Georgia, I'm sure there would be a lot more of these country citizens, you know, fighting, you know, and I think this is just like the reality. Like something has to happen in order for, you know, Ukraine to get like the full support. But yeah, I heard it's kind of, when it comes to the support, I heard it's like a metaphor, like boiling the frog. So boiling the frog is kind of like if they decide to give Ukraine all the weapons like right away, you know, then, you know, Russia gets decimated, they lose, they have to retreat. Then maybe they'll do like a tactical nuke because, you know, Russia is strong, they have to have a win somehow. So when it comes to boiling the frog, it's kind of like we give, you know, Ukraine weapons sometime like here, and then like they have a stalemate, they give them more weapons when Russia starts to make a little advances so they can push them back, and it keeps going on like this, but then it feeds the military industrial complex, and
there's
the war doesn't end and more people.
There's pro-Russian separatist view that they wish the West would stop giving weapons to Ukraine because it's just prolonging this conflict, and that they should just give them these,
this is
these
Russian
regions.
propaganda.
But this is actual perspectives held by some people within Ukraine, right? There are pro-Russian separatists in Ukraine, specifically in the Kharkiv region and Odessa and some of the semi-occupied territories. Like there are people that hold those ideologies.
Well, of course, man. There's like crazy people everywhere. I mean, you have separatists in your own country, like Quebec. They want to be their own country sometimes.
Well, they didn't pass the vote in 97.
Oh, yeah, don't worry. There'll be another vote, I'm sure. But so what I want to kind of like, you know, maybe like not end with, but I want to talk about, do you think European countries should start sending troops to Ukraine now?
That's a difficult question, but I really don't think that. I think there might be a way they can do it without raising a red flag. A lot of Europeans have already came on their own accord. Do I think European countries should start sending over personnel right now? I mean, I can't really give you a direct answer, but it does put a target on their back, right? So, I mean, if they send 50,000 German soldiers into Ukraine, is there a possibility of them striking Germany? You know, it is potentially possible that it'll put a target on their back. So I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer, really, but I think people I think it's up to individuals at this point, which is cool, and I like that. I'm glad the government is not deciding for people. I'm glad that people still have a personal choice whether they want to come and fight or not. And do I think more people should? Yeah, they should. That would be awesome. But am I putting on a gun and sling and a bulletproof vest and running around shooting people? No. So I mean, it's hard for me to say that. I don't want more people to die. Nobody does. But this is a war, and for it to stop, and for this to end, more people do need to die. And unfortunately, the death will continue. Either way, it'll be civilians, it'll be Ukrainians, it'll be Russians, but people are going to die. This is not good. This is inevitable. I know that I'm bringing up a moot point, but bringing in a whole bunch of soldiers from Europe is definitely going to bring in a whole lot more death.
But do you think the war will be over sooner? Because if the war will be over sooner, then maybe there will be less death.
I think you could conscript 100,000 Ukrainian people and bring them to the border right now. There's not enough weapons and infrastructure for them to fight off the Russians. I think that at the end of the day, what's the point of having more military when we don't have enough military infrastructure to support them? If that gives you an answer.
No, it's true. Like, Ukraine does need more weapons. And there's, like, I was talking before about the bill that is not being passed, which would have helped Ukraine. But yeah, I mean, like you were saying, like, if they do that, where they just like put meat into the grinder, these are like Russian tactics. I don't know. I was looking at the latest figures. Like, every day, like this last week or so, it's like over 1,000 Russian casualties a day. And then I started to think, like, do they really care about their people? They're just throwing meat into the grinder. And yeah, I know, like, when you're on the offensive, like, you lose more people. But, I watch kind of like some updates on it. It's like on these reliable kind of source, like, YouTube channels. And it seems like the tactics Russian uses are like, I don't know, very, middle 20th century. Like,
from the sounds of it, they throw a bunch of people at them, and then they'll slowly slip in these slivers of well-trained battalions, from what I've heard, So they are well-trained Russian soldiers that are capable of doing a lot of damage, and they're not happy to throw out a human shield in front of them.
Yeah, this reminds me of, have you seen that show Futurama? It's like a TV show, Futurama.
Yes, of course.
Cartoon show. Yeah. But anyways, there's like, Zap Brannigan? Yeah. So Zap Brannigan, he has like, he's like this kind of really bad kind of commander,
macho man
of this army,
in love with Leela.
Yeah. So anyways, Zap Brannigan, he got this award because he stopped these killer robots, and these killer robots were like, they were super unstoppable for everybody. And then he says in his speech, so like, how'd you do it, Zap Brannigan? And he's like, so I understand that these killbots have a limit, so each of them can only kill 10,000 people. So I put 10,000 people like each, for each killbot, and I lost like millions of men, but all the killbots died. And they're giving him an award for this. It's like meat grinder text, like the killbots, they can only kill like 10,000 people and then they die. Yeah, it's basically like what Russia's doing. Putin's like, I just put like all my men there, and then Ukrainians will run out of bullets, and then I win. It's like, so I don't know. How can you value life that less?
It seems quite archaic military tactics, but Ukraine is potentially being used as a testing ground for a lot of weapons from Iran, from North Korea, and Russia is speeding up production, importation. So things are getting more scary. It's not just about frontline military supply. It's about our air defenses right here in Odessa, where you live, in Kyiv, where I live. So if our air defenses are depleted and they can speed up missile production and importation, then it's potentially going to be disastrous. And that's obviously the biggest fear, and the economic effects of that. There'll be mass migration outside of Ukraine again. People will be running in fear. There'll only be a few crazy people like me hiding in the corners, being journalists and medics, and the few crazy people enough to stay, and they'll be mass, because a lot of people came back. A lot of people came back to Ukraine. They missed home, and they decided that they want to come back and live here. The moment this place becomes extremely dangerous again, a lot of those people are going to leave, and the impacts on the economy are going to be horrific, and it could be a downward spiral. So my biggest fear and concern, it's not only the front, it's the economic front, which would be targeting the capital and targeting a lot of these big cities that they've been doing repeatedly for a long time. Kyiv hasn't had a big attack in over 2 weeks. I mean, it is concerning when it gets a little bit too quiet, because you always know it's not like they're going to stop attacking Kyiv. I don't think not one person in this entire city would believe that they're never going to attack Kyiv again. So you're just waiting. When is it going to come? How big is it going to be? January 2nd, 99 ballistic ballistic missiles. They hit us with 99 missiles.
Yeah, because I've been
just in Kyiv, right?
Yeah, I've been staying a lot of time in Odessa. So I arrived like the day a few days ago when that building was struck. Children died. It's really sad.
There's a 3-year-old boy they found under the rubble.
Yeah, I've seen like these photos. Very graphic, very sad. But yeah, so from my flats, I can kind of, when I look out the window during these kind of attacks, I can see kind of like, sometimes I can see like the rockets or the Shahids or like the air defense going off. And it's so surreal, man. Like I look out my window and then I just see kind of like some Shahids or some rockets in the air. And then I see something from the ground coming up. And then you can see them kind of hit each other. And it's like a big firework. It's so wild, man. And yeah, the other night, so my girlfriend, she takes this like very seriously. I think I should take it more seriously than I should. But anyways, the other night we spent most of the night till like 3-4 in the morning, like in the garage. What kind of life is this, you know? Where you have to go to the garage, and it's not just me and her down there and her cat, Businka, by the way. It's a beautiful cat. Kind of looks like yours, but I think Businka's cuter. But anyways, so when you go down there, there's so many people. Like there's kids. Like I don't know. It's like so sad.
I was teaching a grade 1 class today in a bomb shelter.
Yeah.
Because the air alert went off.
Yeah, this is like the reality for people. And I work at a school
where I teach preschool grade 1. So, you know, this is an unfortunate reality of where we're living and what's going on.
No, it's so sad. I mean, it's one thing to see photos, but it's also like another thing just to experience it. And I just feel like, you know, more people need to kind of, I guess, like experience it in order for them to have a strong opinion on whether they should help or not. And it's really sad it has to come down to that, because everyone can't just come to Ukraine and see it, you know? They have to come to this on their own. But unfortunately, critical thinking skills and Russian misinformation are, yeah, it's making like a lot of
just
things
have to do our best to fight it, man. That's all we can do. Create films, create information, take photos, you know, and continue to talk about it. That's the most important thing, I think.
Well, of course. So, so you haven't been to like these occupied areas. You said you were in Kupiansk, or you know people from Kupiansk.
I've been in Kharkiv twice in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, actually, I visited most of the oblasts already, but I've never been to Kharkiv. Like, how is it now? Like, I heard it, I know it was attacked very hard at the beginning of the war.
I was recently there at a wedding between a soldier and a doctor. So the soldier is from the United States, actually, and the doctor is a frontline doctor from Odessa. And they both live in Kharkiv. How's the situation there? I mean, it is what it is. It's being bombed a lot, but they do very quick repairing jobs. Yeah. And people just pretend that life's normal and continue to live there. Luckily, when I've been there, to a Westerner, this sounds crazy, but when I was there, there's only a couple explosions. Last time I was there, a few people died, but it was pretty far from where I was, so nothing crazy or out of the ordinary. So
that's horrible, man. Like, yeah, no, I just can't imagine. Like, I don't know. I left Ukraine, you know, after war, because I was like in Mukachevo for like 2 months after the war started, and I just kind of, I don't know, it was just a different life. It's just so crazy because I talk about my life now, and it's like before war and after war, you know, because after war my life totally changed, man. Yeah, but before war it was like, you know, quite stable. So now I just kind of like divide it in before war and after war, and you know, a lot of Ukrainians, you know, are dealing with this as well. I don't know. This is so traumatic. I don't know. I know before the invasion, because like after 2014, the revolution, you know, Ukraine and Russia had kind of like strained relations, but now it's just kind of like a whole generation is like growing up, and they're never like they're never going to be able to you know, be friendly, you know, with Russian people, or, you know, Ukraine and Russia as geopolitical kind of friends. It's like not a thing. And I used to do like some interviews where I'd rent a studio and just invite like some Ukrainian people over, and I just like talk to them about the first days of the invasion. And it's also kind of like this project I'm working on. And then I asked my friend who I was interviewing, I was saying like, hey Taras, like, would you ever be able to have a friend that is Russian? And really quick, he was like, no, I won't be able to. And it's so crazy. This is like, you know, how it is now. That's not even like depending on, you know, if the person is a good person just because they were born in a country, but you can't blame the person because people from their country and their government that they supported or they should protest against is kind of blowing like this other person's country up. Like it's like so unfathomable. I don't know. Like I can't really, I don't know. When I talk about it, it just gets me so frustrated. Yeah.
It's probably the way some countries feel about Americans.
Yeah, well,
I mean, no offense by that, but
no, it's totally true. And when people tell me how stupid, like after Trump got elected, people are always saying like how stupid like America is. They're like I'd be in France or something, like, America has Trump, right? You guys are stupid or something. And I was like, you know what? We are stupid, but I'm not. I left for a reason. I'm not one of
the French are just always at an advantage because they have like really good wine and cheese. So do they have good fighters? Can always talk down on everyone.
Do they have good fighters?
I don't know so much about that.
Yeah, man, the biggest thing is Ukraine needs weapons, because if they don't get weapons, then this war will spill over into Europe. And I'm not confident in my own country, especially if Donald Trump gets elected. So I don't know. I guess to sum up and to close all this out, the West still needs to kind of support Ukraine, with weapons or monetarily or whatever. But this can't drag on any longer because more casualties.
I think it's pretty remarkable how Ukraine has innovated so much technology in their own country and created so much, even in terms of drone technology, to assist their country in this war. Yeah. And if the Western world too comes together to continue with innovation for terms of generating and creating new defense systems and weapons, then it could make a huge difference. And it already has in this war. So, at the end of the day, ideologies, technology, innovation, support, and on our end, information can potentially lead to helping Ukraine with a victory.
Oh, totally. Well put, Jay. So I'll tell you what, we're out of time right now. Why don't you plug your socials? And yeah.
My name's Jay Schnell, so you can check me out at JaySchnell official on Instagram, TikTok, pretty much anywhere. You can check me out. I also run a school called J Tree Academy. You can check us out on all those social media pages as well. We teach English, and that's how I fund my journalistic work and documentaries.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I know Jay is Canadian, but he's a good guy. Okay? So follow him on your socials if you have time. Well, thanks for being a guest, Jay. I wish you luck with your journalistic work in Ukraine, and be safe out there, man.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you for having me.
All right. Cheers.